In this video, we'll look at factoring a quadratic in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is not equal to 1. So in other words, the leading term has a coefficient other than 1. When you're factoring a quadratic in this form, you can use what's called the AC method, where you multiply a and c together, find factors of the product AC that multiply to be AC and add to be the coefficient B. Then rewrite the polynomial with the middle term split using the numbers found in step 2. So at that point, you have not factored, you've just split the middle term, and then you have to factor by grouping. So there's several steps involved. When you get to the end, you definitely want to check your answer by multiplying it out and making sure you get your original equation. All right, so let's go ahead and use these steps to factor 7x squared plus 12x minus 4. So first, let me identify my a, b, and c. So a is the number in front of the squared term, a equals 7. B is the number in front of x, so b equals 12. And c is the number that's off by itself, that's a constant. So c equals -4. The sign goes with it. So using the AC method, I'll have a times c is 7 times -4, which is -28. Now I'm looking for factors of -28 that multiply to be -28 and add to be a +12. I start by listing out my factors. I could have 1 and 28, 2 and 14. And I could go ahead and stop there because the difference of 2 and 14 is +12. If I needed to list out more factors, I could go ahead and list out the rest, 4 and 7. But I've already narrowed in on my two numbers. If I do a -2 and a +14, these multiply to be AC, which was a -28. So I had to have a positive and a negative, and they add to be B, which is a +12. So +14 and -2 add up to a +12. So what I'll do now is I'll split my B term. So split the BX term. So I get 7x squared minus 2x plus 14x minus 4. So notice nothing happened to the first and last term. I just took that 12x and rewrote it as minus 2x plus 14x. So now the next step is to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and group this. I have to have a plus between my groupings. So I'll go ahead and group this. And I want to factor by grouping. So I'm going to look for the GCF right here. 7 and 2 do not share any common factors, so x would be the only thing I could pull out here. I have x squared and x. Here, 14x and minus 4, the GCF of those two would just be a 2. They're both even. And so when I factor by grouping, let me adjust my pen here. It keeps reverting back to a very thick pen. Okay, so now I factor by grouping. I'll pull out the GCF from the first two terms. So I'll pull out the x, and in parentheses, I get 7x minus 2. Now I'll pull out the GCF from the second group, pull out a plus 2, and in parentheses, I get 7x minus 2. Now we looked at factoring by grouping in a previous video, and the key is that your two things in parentheses, once you've factored out the GCF of each group, these two have to be the same. And then you'll factor out whatever's in parentheses. So we'll actually factor out 7x minus 2. And so now what that looks like is we will have our 7x minus 2, and what's left over from the first term is an x, and what's left over from the second term is a plus 2. So this would be my factored form of my original polynomial, or my original quadratic. So let me go back to my original 7x squared plus 12x minus 4. And I want to go ahead and check my answer over on the side here. So to check, I would take my 7x minus 2 times x plus 2, and I would either multiply it using the box method or by foiling it out. So if I FOIL it out, I'll end up with 7x squared. Those are my first two terms. My outside terms are 7x and plus 2, so that would be plus 14x. Inside terms are negative 2 and x, so minus 2x. And the last terms are negative 2 times positive 2, so minus 4. Combine my like terms, and I get 7x squared plus 12x minus 4. And I look back at my original, 7x squared plus 12x minus 4. And that tells me that the answer I got, 7x minus 2 times x plus 2, is correct. So that's what I would answer for my final answer. So remember, when you're using the AC method, you only want to use it if the leading coefficient is not equal to 1. And then what you're looking for is factors of A times C that add up to be B. Then you split the BX term, and then you factor by grouping. So that is the AC method of factoring.